Thank you. I hope you'll understand if I feel just a little bit nervous tonight. And I think as many of you walked in tonight, you likely understand why. Because joining us in the audience tonight are some of this country's most important philanthropists. And I think some of you up there right now might be turning your head wondering, who just arrived? Was it Gates? Buffett? Is Oprah here? I promise you, they're not, and she's not. But this is likely probably one of the first images that we have when we hear the word philanthropist. And it's kind of a shame because it really doesn't need to be that way. Big names and even bigger wallets. And philanthropy really shouldn't look that way because the idea of taking care of one's own community really is as old as civilization. As a matter of fact, the word philanthropy comes from the late Latin word philanthropia, which quite simply means kindness, benevolence, and love toward humanity. But the plain, simple truth is that every single one of you here today can, will, and should impact the lives of others through your philanthropy. And this has been true across time. People in their own time and space, changing the world around them in some of the most profound and the most modest ways. And the difference between the two matters the least. So why do we doubt ourselves, especially today? Well, in a media-rich and headline-driven world, it can feel inescapable that meaningful philanthropy is only accomplished by caricatures of the wealthy elite, those who can write that $1 million or $500,000 check, when it's just simply not true. But the reality is that philanthropy has been around since the beginning of time. Acts of philanthropy have deep roots in diverse societies that go back hundreds and hundreds of years with unique cultures of giving and sharing. As a matter of fact, on this continent alone, well before the wealth that we know today existed, Native American tradition shared this mutual responsibility for balance in the community that was deeply embedded in tribal activities, well before the Europeans ever arrived in this land. But developments up through the 18th century changed how people lived through urban growth and industrialization. In the late 1800s to early 1900s, society grew rapidly, economies expanded, but so did this idea of structured charity to help those around us. During that time, there were interesting commitments to important causes of the day that drove unbelievable modern-day investments in charitable organizations. There were interesting examples of how public policy, coupled with the sheer will of individuals and generous resource, drove change, societal change that impacted people in unbelievable ways. Names like Carnegie, Mellon, Rockefeller, Ford, institutions like the New York Community Trust, the Cleveland Foundation, the United Way, all helped to accelerate momentum of giving across this country. There were commitments made to important causes that drove important issues for humanity, such as eradicating disease, tackling poverty, forging pathways to civil rights, or bringing clean air and water. And we quickly became known as one of the most generous nations in the world. Matter of fact, over the last 40 years alone, our charitable giving has grown to more than $427 billion annually, the highest ever. And that's before you even equate the value of our volunteer time, which now tops some 7 billion hours every single year of people choosing to spend their time supporting others. But society is never stagnant. It's constantly changing and evolving. Every single day, we see media that's intended to grab our attention, drive a brand or a click. Narratives that are put forth that can negatively impact the way that we view the world, our place in it, or our contribution within it as well. Studies continue to tell us how gifts that we make to others not only support each other, but can help us feel more socially connected and improve our physical and mental health. But the media will also very quick to pick up every single new headline of new philanthropy that are all driven to grab your attention, all headline-driven, celebrity-backed, curated photos of things happening in faraway places, both economically and geographically. Each act of philanthropy seemingly wanting to one-up the next effort, at times even cleanse a personal image or brand. But what gets lost in all of this is that so much of it's intended to be or is actually very, very good. I mean, it's very difficult to argue with Jennifer Lopez's commitment to quality healthcare and education for women and girls, or Leonardo DiCaprio's leadership around reversing the effects of climate change, or Bill and Melinda Gates' commitment to ending poverty, malaria, or bringing greater equity into this world. The commitment they are making is massive and should be applauded. But the messaging that can reach us individually can sometimes seem out of perspective or little grounding in our own communities. And we see it every single day in our own work. Dennis, imagine if we just had the money, what we could do. I mean, if these icons of society are doing these incredible things, how can my modest contribution possibly measure up? As opposed to really thinking about what we could do today to impact those who are struggling right now down the street from us. The values of generosity and philanthropy are always learned closest to us. Growing up here in small town Wisconsin was a wonderful experience with many great joys. But we also faced our fair share of challenges and misfortunes, experiences I'm sure many of you understand all too well in your own context. Experiences that we had to rely on the support of others, maybe at times, from time to time, a government program or a nonprofit. People and organizations who not only supported us, but provided us hope. Hope that grew into pathways toward a good life. And those values of compassion and service started with those closest. My father served in the Navy as a Navy medic in the Vietnam conflict. My mother was both a sexual assault nurse examiner and a trauma nurse for many of her professional years. Both continued to serve their communities in ways that went well beyond anything impacting simply their family or their children. And I continue to be surrounded by a whole slew of people, a community of people, as a husband, a father, a nonprofit professional, as a foundation leader. People who are selflessly choosing every day to impact the lives of others with almost no expectation of reward and recognition. This is at the true heart of philanthropy. So philanthropy is good for others, but it's also good for us. But we seem to be doing less and less of it. Now, I mentioned earlier, charitable giving is at all-time record highs, without a doubt. But if you look a little bit deeper, you'll understand that individual giving has dropped dramatically from 83% of all gifts in 1978 to just 68% today. More and more is being given, but by fewer and fewer people all across the economic divide. And while there are any number of reasons why this is occurring, I would contend that more of us have doubts about whether or not our gifts are comparatively having an impact, something I fundamentally disagree with. I mean, let's take a minute just to think a little bit about what our community might look like without the kindness and the benevolence that exists within our philanthropy. Imagine what would happen to that elderly neighbor who's looking for that meal and companionship to reach their threshold every single week. Imagine what would happen to that new immigrant who counts on a community tutor to navigate a new language or a foreign land. What would happen to our shorelines and our wetlands that would no longer be cleaned or protected? What would happen to those individuals of unique or special abilities who simply count on a sponsor or a coach to provide just a little bit of equity in this world? Or the cold and the tired and the hungry that would be turned away from our shelters because we simply couldn't fill their shelves with the most basic of necessities. Countless important acts of philanthropy that represent what it means simply to be human. These are the important philanthropists that exist in our community. And these are the important philanthropists that are with us here today. If a life around the collective power of service has taught me anything over the years, is that we need to return to that root of philanthropy and understand that we are all endowed to make a difference in the lives of others. Again, we are all endowed to make a difference in others. But Dennis, should we not be seeking inspiration from others? Well, of course we should. But inspiration does not always come from the traditional pillars of society. It can come from the most unexpected places and some of the most surprising of people. Right here in Green Bay, Wisconsin, a food pantry was founded with a very simple idea. No one should ever go hungry. And we all have the opportunity to restore hope and pride and dignity to those who are in need. And for over 35 years, they have provided more than 150 million pounds of food to those in need, all with almost no federal, state, or local support. And as inspiring as that is, I find the heart of philanthropy even more incredible, because to accomplish this, they've done this with over 3 million volunteer hours. It is a true demonstration of neighbors helping neighbors when they need it the most. But what you might find even more incredible is that more than 2 million of those volunteer hours, some 72% of them, were committed by those who received the pantry's services. Let that sink in for just a moment. People who, due to circumstances in their lives, are seeking something as fundamental as food, are turning around and supporting each other with love and gratitude. I find their demonstration of philanthropy to be overwhelming. And our communities are filled with people like this all the time. You know them. We see veterans every single day turning around and supporting their fellow soldiers and their families to make sure they have the benefits they so rightfully deserve. We see women who have fought their way out of the horrific circumstances of abuse or trafficking and would seemingly want to put that behind them, turn around and support each other as mentors for those who seek a similar path. People with seemingly less means and privilege supporting each other with what they have. Now, we should be deeply grateful to all donors who are giving growing amounts of resource to support critical programs all throughout our community and the impact that that is having. But let's also remember that we all have and can find inspiration from what we have to give to others as well. Now, as I said before, there'll be magazines and Hollywood and business outlets that are going to generate content designed to grab your attention and draw clicks. This year's list of most generous philanthropists has just been released. Who moved up? Who moved down? Who's getting divorced? What will that all mean? Click, 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 click. You know you're doing it. But deep, deep down, I think we all know something to be quite, quite true. No one can ever place a value or categorize the impact that you will have on another human being. Because a hungry person was fed, many more are going to feed their families. Because a person believed in a young woman's strength, she now provides many more with hope and light. Each one of us here today has the opportunity, with what we've been given, to impact others and teach others through philanthropy. Your work as this community's philanthropist is what's going to give that passerby on the street, that coworker quietly struggling at work, your neighbor, heck, the person you might meet in the lobby tonight, real hope. So I ask you to leave here tonight with your passions in hand. Find that nonprofit. Visit your local volunteer center. Sit down, listen, learn, understand where the needs are. Fill those with what you have available to you. Because that is something that will not only fill your hearts, but will lift all of our spirits. And I promise you, that is a contagion that is far more powerful than any perceived level of wealth or influence. And if I haven't convinced you that you still have something left to give, I'm going to leave you tonight with this quote from Anne Frank. No one ever became poor by giving. We all have something important to give each other: love, compassion, and support. Thank you very much.